And trying to improve on the SAT, you might notice that you're in this phase of just understanding what the problem is. After you've taken a test, you can fully understand what that problem is and what it's asking. But during the exam, you still get that problem wrong, but you felt like you understood the main concept of it. This is what's known as being in the middle scoring area. And if you ever feel like this for any kind of problem, this video is for you. How do you get out of this middle scoring area? Well, the key is actually with your practicing method. You fully understand the skill, right? And what it's asking of you first, right? That's the first learning idea, right? Then you move to the practicing concept where you actually have to practice that example. Knowing it is not enough. You actually have to have good, useful, practical knowledge with it, which just comes from doing. And that is your practicing method. So the question is, how can we make that more effective so that we can get rid of all the problems in this and move them up, right? So my name is Karthik. Here's how you're going to improve your score 200 points using this strategy on problems like that. Okay, so here's the main key to practicing effectively. What you're going to do is you're going to identify the broad skill. And these are the skills that the SAT specifically names, right? They have certain names for certain types of questions, but what you're going to realize is in these types of questions that the SAT gives you, there's multiple different types, right? Especially for something like reading, there's multiple different types of questions within that skill. Right? Within the broad concept that the SAT gives you for a specific skill, there's many different things within that, right? And what you're going to use in basically understanding that is you're going to figure out what type of question is. You can label it yourself, right? For reading, it's going to be a different type of question within every single large SAT named skill. But for math and grammar, it's specifically going to be smaller logistical concepts. So concepts that actually have a name and you can look up and fully understand, except with reading, they're just more conceptual and you can't really look up that specific, a formula that would apply to every single thing and make you get it correct 100% of the time, when that's actually the case with math and grammar. So you need to practice using that correct formula. And this is how you're going to know whether you need to actually do this practice thing or actually learn it. And that just comes with basically recognizing that all the information that you have. If you fully understand what type of question it is and how it should be approached, then you've probably already finished learning it. And if you're still getting it wrong, you need to review and practice that type of method again and again. If you don't recognize that type of question and it seems unfamiliar to you, that's something you need to focus on learning, right? And there are always going to be difficult and easy examples. You might understand how to do the easy one, but not understand how to do the difficult one, but you know what skill it belongs to. You're still past the learning stage at most part, and you need to review complicated methods, which only comes with excelling how to do the easy examples, because all complicated methods are extra steps towards easy examples, and once you know them, you basically know the difficult examples as well. So you need to master easy examples, right? So here's how you're going to do that. You need to learn how to practice effectively. So I've already mentioned external resources a bunch of times, but the one resource that people are so surprised by and don't know exists is the SAT Suite Question Bank, which is basically a bank of questions that probably aren't going to be used in the SAT again, but it's more than 20,000 different official SAT questions from official exams that are retired, basically. It has full detailed answers on why every answer is correct and why every answer is wrong. They have sorted difficulty. They have a specific skills, right? You need to look for the type of problem within that, right? And obviously there's Khan Academy, practice exams, QASs, but the Suite Question Bank makes it so easy to identify the type of problem you got wrong. And they have one for digital exams and for paper exams. So you can figure out the SAT type concept, right? And then with the SAT type concept, you can figure out what type of problem it is within that. And though that takes some effort, it takes some effort to research what kind of problem it is and where specifically you'll find it. That is so worth it, because it's literally going to boost your score a significant amount of points. You're going to boost your accuracy on the questions that you typically get wrong just from this catered practice, right? The whole point of effective practice is that it's catered to the specific thing that you're doing and you're doing it repeatedly, right? And once you have this very specific skill, this where you've gone beyond the SAT concept, you're going to focus on improving accuracy with that. So now that you've found where you can find that source of information, you need to improve your ability to get accurate practice, right? Not just accurate practice in the sense correct questions, but in the sense that you're always getting the practice problems correct. So maybe you start off with the easy type questions and you get about most of them correct, but still some of them wrong. Why do you get them wrong? Right? And this isn't a question that I can answer for you. It's something you need to figure out for yourself. You need to go back in your practice exam, look at the right answers, look at the explanation, and ask yourself, why did I get that wrong? What did I miss? What did I not do? What was missing that prevented me from getting the correct answer, right? And I could give you a whole framework on what that is, but it's best if you come up with that yourself. You fully understand why you get it wrong, and you can do that from the explanations of the answers, or you can just figure out what the right question is and think through the entire passage without a timer, without anything, and figure out why was that the case, and how can you improve upon that? How can I make sure that this mistake doesn't happen again, right? And this is what I mean by accurate practice, because you can practice a bunch of different problems and never learn from your mistakes, and then you're back at square one. But doing this framework of figuring out why you got the problem wrong and creating specific strategies that are tailored to you to improve upon that will help you. And what you're going to do with those tailored strategies is basically you're going to implement that strategy with a new set of problems on the same skill, of course, but with that new strategy, implement this type of problem, right? Focus on what you're trying to do, what you're trying to do differently than what you did last time to make sure that the mistake doesn't repeat itself. And if that is literally just paying more direct attention to the question, maybe now I'm reading every word of every single question for a second time with my hand on the piece of paper so I notice every single word and don't skip anything. Maybe that's what you're doing. It could be something as simple as that. But what you're going to do with this new strategy, right, is you're figuring out the same thing that works for you, right? You're going to notice maybe with this new strategy, you actually get a bunch of problems correct now, and you actually get 100% accuracy in the easy portion of those questions. So you move on to medium difficulty. And that works for most of it, except for a couple of them, right? And then you need to improve. You need to rerun this framework of why and how can I improve on that, and implement the new strategy again until you maximize the hardest questions of this skill that you're trying to learn, right? Progressively overload to harder difficulties in order to improve. You're not going to improve by looking at the same challenge that you've already conquered. You need to improve by going through harder and harder things and creating more effective strategies that work for every single category, right? So that being said, that you need to constantly move up and do problems, that is one of the key components of making this practice strategy work. You need to retest constantly. You need to figure out how many times you're taking practice exams, when those practice exams are actually like helping you, right? Because they help you only when you've practiced beforehand after looking at one of your practice tests, and then you take another one and figure out your new weak points. That's the only case when they help you. So retest when it helps you, right? It doesn't have to be constantly, like I said here, but it should be often. It should be frequent, right? And because of that, you need to put in a lot of volume. You need to like put in a severe amount of volume for actually getting good at this method, right? Because you're creating your own method and you're seeing if it works, and it is most personal to you because you know the mistake that you made and you know how to fix it for your own self, right? For the best for yourself, that's how you fix it. So retest for knowing to know all of your weak points that need certain practices, and that you need to practice this as a result. And that's how you get better. You retest and then you put in practice volume, right? And when you're practicing itself, right, use the volume. Like I've already talked about this concept of getting good at the problems by doing harder and harder problems and making sure your method still works. But that's where volume also comes in, because it's the sheer quantity of problems that you're going to do that are going to determine your accuracy, right? If you only do 5 and you determine like, okay, my new strategy works for every single time I get it, you shouldn't really think like that. You should think that I need to maximize the amount of problems I do. And even if I get one wrong out of 100, that's still really good, right? Make sure your strategies work and you actually get more accurate than before. Okay, so I get this question a lot, and it's this idea of how long is this going to take? How many practice problems do I have to do per skill? Give me a number, give me something I can look for. And this is the wrong mindset, right? Because even if I did know all the details about you and how fast you learn and how long you've been preparing for the SAT and what your section sub scores are and what problems you get incorrect, even if I gave you an educated answer on what your thing is, you're going to reach that, might not get what you wanted, and then immediately give up, right? Because you're approaching it with this idea that there's a limited amount of problems that I need to do that's going to get me where I want. And all I need to know is figure out that number, and then I'll be permanently motivated to reach that number. And that number does exist. You know, somewhere in reality, there is that number, but you're never going to figure out what that number truly is. So here's how you should actually approach practice. Instead of focusing on the number, focus on figuring out like how I can do this every single day. Focus on figuring out how much time I can commit. Can I commit the most time as possible? Instead of figuring out what the minimum required amount to get what you want is, figure out how much you can maximize the amount of effort you do. And by doing that, right, by maximizing the amount of effort, even though it might seem you're doing more than what is really needed, you're going to actually see progress way faster than the person that thinks they only need to do 100 problems total to improve their score. You're going to do way better than the person who has this fixed problem mindset versus you who thinks that they're going to do as much as it takes to see progress, right? It's like using a timer instead of a stopwatch. I've always recommended when you're first starting out with analysis and you're trying to get better, use a stopwatch so you can completely solve all the problems and then figure out at the end, what is the ultimate solution. So that's why like people who use a timer and constrict that and just don't answer the last couple of questions, they fail to fully understand what they're doing wrong because they have a limited mindset on what they're doing. Right. And obviously you're limited to your time on the SAT and you get better at speed through accurate practice and through getting faster at that. But it's this idea of you're cutting yourself off if you have a limited thing that you're trying to aim for instead of doing as much as possible. Thank you guys so much. And I hope you learned something today.